Inspector Ghote Trusts the Heart by H.R.F. Keating. Read by Sam Dastel. Chapter 13. It was, as Ghote had finally been sure it was going to be, a fruitless wait in the shadow of the KEM hospital. After 20 minutes he had proposed that they give it up. After 30 minutes, Moneyboy Desai had consented, begging only to stay on alone in the car while Ghote went into the hospital and from there belatedly reported to Superintendent Karandika. It had not been a pleasant 10 minutes at all, standing there in the antiseptic-pervaded hospital entrance hall, endeavouring to speak quietly into the telephone with white uniformed nurses clicking by on sharp heels and occasional doctors giving disdainful, suspicious glances at this impertinent, uniformed chauffeur in their midst. Superintendent Karandika had been every bit as hostile as Ghote had expected, and it had been a considerable time before Ghote had been able to convince him that only the extreme urgency of their departure from Mount Greatest had prevented him reporting the change in the kidnappers' plan. Eventually, after listening to a long and forceful account of the penalties that awaited anyone who failed even in the spirit of their duties when they came under Karandika, Ghote had managed to secure a grudging acknowledgment that this time he had not apparently betrayed the letter of his orders. But the whole experience had left him feeling drained to the core. And then they had set out for home again, cutting across south and west as quickly as they could towards Kambala Hill. It had been almost entirely a time of depressed silence. Only once had Moneyboy Desai spoken. "What do you think they will do now?" A plaintive question. Ghote's answer had been as cheerless. "I suppose they will get in contact again, probably by telephone. It is the only thing they can do." Nor was their reception at the penthouse any more encouraging. Mrs. Desai came out into the hall to greet them, and she would not even listen to her husband's feverish inquiries about whether there had been any calls. "So, you are back," she said to him. "Back, after leaving me with no explanation to give for you not being here." Moneyboy Desai's boldly handsome features took on then a look of offended anger. "And am I having to say where I am going always?" he demanded. "Am I a child only, that I have to tell I am going here, I am going there? And when it is the wife of the Commissioner of Police himself who is inquiring?" Mrs. Desai retorted, her long red fingernails flicking in a gesture of contemptuous triumph. The proprietor of Trustex assumed an expression of instant wariness. His wife was quick to see she had the advantage. "Yes," she said, "it was Meena who rang and asked what you were feeling about the matter. And what could I reply? I found that you had gone. And then, when she asked to speak to the CID man the commissioner had sent to keep a guard on your little Haribai, I found he also had gone." She darted a look of knockdown reproach at Ghote, but she was not going to waste time on recrimination at such a lowly level. Her anger-engorged eyes flicked quickly back to her husband. "And what was it you were doing?" she said. "You were trying to pay those men our money." There could be no denying that. Ghote was holding the heavy leather Gladstone bag with its stuffed bundles of notes. Moneyboy Desai stood looking, for all the boldness of his features, hangdog. The expression did not placate his wife, rather the reverse. "Yes," she went on, "always it is you who are thinking you know best. Never are you taking my ideas for publicity for the business. That is charity only, you are always saying. And it is the same here. You are thinking that you know best how to deal with these men. Pay, 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 it is all you are saying, and all the time it is quite unnecessary." "Unnecessary? Unnecessary? They have telephoned. What has happened?" The proprietor of Trustex wanted to know. The desire was stamped on deep-set eyes, big pointed nose, wide taut mouth. "Telephoned? Why should such men telephone?" his wife replied. "But to make a new appointment, to say what they want, to agree to accept a reasonable sum. Not at all, not at all. That is not the way to deal with such people. I have told you all along." Ghote, standing quietly witnessing this marital combat, noted soberly that this was not strictly true. But Moneyboy Desai was too concerned to know what the kidnappers were doing for sober noting. "What new thing has happened?" he demanded in an infuriated shout. "What new thing? Tell me, tell me!" Mrs. Desai smiled a smile of panther sweetness. "But if you had stayed at home, you would have heard from Meena herself," she replied. "What would I have heard?" Each syllable was ground out. "Why, that they have tracked down these men only." "Tracked them down? Captured them? Pitku is safe? Is he safe?" Ghote found to his burning inner joy that the proprietor of Trustex was voicing all the questions he himself longed to pound out. Mrs. Desai turned and walked languidly back into the rich, red-carpeted drawing-room. Her husband, his big teeth clenched in fury at this provocation, followed her. "Well, answer," he said. "Answer." "They are closing in on them," Mrs. Desai replied with maddening calm. "Closing in? Where? How? Are they thinking of the boy?" Mrs. Desai shrugged her elegant shoulders. "Do you think Mina and I are concerned with the details?" she asked. "I tell you they have found out somehow where these men are hiding, and the Commissioner has ordered a massive sweep. Thank goodness there is someone to see that a citizen is not treated in this manner." For a puzzled moment, Ghote could not think which citizen was being treated in what manner. Then he realized. Mrs. Desai had been insulted and upset by the attempt on her stepson, and it was she who was being avenged. And Pitku, he found himself thinking savagely, was he to be sacrificed to placate Mrs. Desai? But the about-to-be-avenged lady had not yet finished with her erring husband. "In any case," she said with loftiness, "you can find out everything for yourself, man to man." "What do you mean, man to man?" "Just that I have promised you would ring the Commissioner himself as soon as you got in." Mrs. Desai paused, savouring her victory. "I have promised you will ring," she added, "and tell the Commissioner that you have stopped all this ridiculous business of wanting to protect these wicked and greedy men." Moneybai Desai's pushingly handsome face took on instantly a look of deep, though secret, obstinacy. Ghote, his senses turned to an ever more acute pitch by the pressure of all that had happened since he had first heard about little Pitku, was able to analyze what the proprietor of Trustex must be feeling as if it were his own heart that was involved. He had pledged himself to pay out for Pitku, but to what deeper extent was a man such as he pledged to a wife 20 years his junior? And here, there seemed, was a chance being held out to him to believe that the newer, more urgent promise could be satisfied, while the older debt was still honoured. But what was this hope that the affair was suddenly near its end? How reliable was what Mrs. Desai had said about the kidnappers having been located? These, Ghote knew, must be the questions Moneybai Desai was asking himself, and they accounted perhaps for that look of reserve. He certainly was not going to go back to the hard line on the strength of what might be only wild words of his wife's. But neither was he going to reiterate his stand on Pitku. Ghote saw now that once again the boy's fate was in the balance. No one would or could pay for his eventual safety except the manufacturer of Trustex. And now, despite all the firmness of resolve that had been implied by his decision to tell Pitku's father himself about the contents of that grisly package, once again his resolution was faltering. But was it faltering with right on its side? If what Mrs. Desai had told them really did come from the Commissioner himself, then there must be a good deal of truth in it. And if so, there really might be no need after all to pay the kidnappers. Yet what could have happened to put Superintendent Karandikar on the men's traces? And if he was closing in on them, was he the sort of man who would give proper attention to little Pitku's safety at the moment of confrontation? Moneybai Desai, who had stood mutinously glaring at his wife, abruptly turned away and shouted for a servant in a voice tingling with suppressed fury. Evidently echoes of the high-raging domestic combat had already reached the servants, because the door was opened with giveaway suddenness, and the Desai's number 1 bearer presented himself. "Get me a drink," the proprietor of Trustex ordered. "Whiskey, a big one." The man padded softly over to the imposing walnut and chrome cocktail cabinet that stood under one of the sunburst clocks, and took out a tumbler and the whiskey bottle. "I will have a drink also," Mrs. Desai said. "Bring it to me now, a whiskey too. And hurry, the Borough Sahib has to make telephone call." "No, I do not," Moneybai Desai countered immediately. "Hurry with my whiskey," said his wife to the bearer, on whose face Ghote was able to observe a tiny delight at this drama unrolling just above his head. "Hurry," Mrs. Desai repeated. "The Borough Sahib wishes to use the telephone." Moneybai Desai's face took on a look of doubly pent-up rage. He strode over to the cocktail cabinet like a bull in full reckless charge and brushed the bearer aside. "Here," he said, "I will fix myself." He seized the whiskey bottle and tipped a hugely generous quantity into a second tumbler. Then, actually snatching the siphon out of the bearer's hands, he splashed a short spurt into and around his own glass, lifted it, and drained it in one. Mrs. Desaix took her drink from the little silver tray on which the bearer had proffered it, and then walked over to the refrigerator. She stood beside it and gestured with an elegant red-nail-tipped hand at the white telephone beside her. She did not say a word. Moneyby Desaix glared at her, but then suddenly a little brutal smile lit his deep-set eyes. "Well," he said, "I am tired. I am exhausted. It has been one hell of a day for me. I am going to bed now." His lurking smile broadened into triumph. He gave his wife a full, unabashed look. "And kindly not to disturb," he said. Followed by the bearer, whose back was pantomiming a much overstated show of discretion, the proprietor of Trustex strode from the room, and left Inspector Ghote alone with Mrs. Desaix. Ghote, who during the whole of the lightning-flashing confrontation between the Desaix had stood not far from the door into the big room, remained where he was. He said nothing. There seemed to be nothing to say. Mrs. Desaix also continued to stand where she had been, beside the telephone. From time to time she took a somewhat exaggerated sip from her drink. She posed her free hand on the edge of the refrigerator cabinet, her red nails catching the light in a gesture of nonchalance so stiffly languid that it made her seem immovable as a carved dancing girl. Watching her, Ghote began to feel acutely thirsty. He had endured that long, stinking and hot drive out to the KEM hospital, and he found he wanted nothing more now than a long, cool drink. Buttermilk, iced. That would be the very thing. And no doubt the refrigerator contained, among much else, a good supply of buttermilk, deliciously cold and refreshing. Abruptly Mrs. Desaix left her post and went over to the radiogram. She began, again with a show of idleness worthy of a film star, to flip through the pile of records on one side of the long, low cabinet. But suddenly her doubly obvious constraint put a notion into Ghote's head. Up till now he had thought of Moneyby Desaix's wife as being no more than a vivid, jerky, implacable force aimed at keeping every rupee of the Desaix wealth in Moneyby Desaix's pockets. Yet could she be as totally single-minded as that? Evidently she had feelings. Why else was she so embarrassed now? So, would it not be possible to appeal to the feeling woman? At the radiogram, Mrs. Desaix had, it seemed, selected the disc she wanted. She was standing reading its label, holding it rather close to her face, vanity apparently forbidding glasses. At any second she would drop the disc onto the turntable, and then, no doubt, blaring music would blot out any chance of a quiet talk. Ghote cleared his throat. The sound in the silent room grated even on his own ears, as if it was a bullock cart crossing a street of cobblestones. Mrs. Desaix darted him a glance of fury. What if she ordered him out? He really would have to go. "Mrs. Desaix? Madam?" She raised a thinly carved eyebrow. "Madam, I wish to talk to you. I wish to discuss. Please, Mrs. Desaix, think of that child." Mrs. Desaix lowered the disc she had been holding so close to her pretty, if tensely so, face. She looked at Ghote with ice-cold disdain. Yet Ghote from his very depths found something which would not let itself be frozen. "Mrs. Desaix," he said, "I am appealing to you. You have had no children. Perhaps you are not very much caring for children. But think, to some people a child is a treasure greater than money, than any sum of money. The tailor is poor, yet I know that in little Pidku he has all the wealth he could desire." "What do you talk?" Mrs. Desaix answered, her voice taking on an edge of lancing anger. "What do you know of me, of children? You have no business." She broke off, but not because Ghote had interrupted. Something from inside her had blocked the thought. Suddenly she tossed the record she had been holding over onto the nearest blue silk sofa and strode away across the big room. "You do not understand," she said, in a voice so muffled that it took Ghote some moments to guess at the words. He waited. He had the sense that a whole delicate series of scales and balances was rocking up and down under the crude weight he had dropped into one of the pans, little knowing the complexity of the apparatus he had set in altered motion. At the end of her long diagonal promenade across the big room, Mrs. Desai swung round. She looked at Ghote full in the face, her eyes ablaze. "No," she spat at him, "you do not understand." "I am going to be told to get out," he thought. "You could never understand. What do you think my life has been? Do you think I have always lived like this, with servants as many as I wanted, with a roof over my head that I know cannot be taken away? I tell you, from the day my father, the colonel— No, I will tell you it all, even what I have not told Money. From the day my father, who would never be more than captain, shot himself, then I never knew a moment of security until the marriage ceremony with Mr. Desai was over." Her face, till seconds ago a cosmetic mask of fragile gaiety, showed now cracks and rents of wretchedness. "Yes," she said, "once we had servants, a few. My old ayah always. But then when he died, my father, when he walked out on us, in a few days we had no one. And was I, a little girl still, able to help myself or my mother? And then later, when I found I did after all have something to take to the bazaar, then I was determined I would get a damn good price." Suddenly she came racing across to Ghote. Was she going to attack him, the long red nails scratching? But she halted 2 feet away and thrust that broken, pretty face close to his. "And I got that price," she said. "I had to fight, I had to plan, I had to wait. But in the end, I married Trust X Manufacturing." There was a hectic blaze in the eyes so close to Ghote's own. "And now I am enjoying," she said. "And he has his son and heir. He has Haribai, and he is well content. But still I must go on pleasing him. And it is not always so easy. You see me, and I am looking fine. I know it. The hairdresser tells me, the beautician also. But there are times when I do not, when I cannot. And he is older, and other things may get a hold on him. How do you think I can risk having children? How do you think I can risk it?" Feeling a leaden intrusion in the pit of his stomach, Ghote realized that this was a question he was actually expected to answer. I see that I realize you have difficulties, great difficulties, and I am feeling them. But I am feeling for another person also, for a person with the name of Pidku." Mrs. Desai did not take her hot eyes off his face. But Ghote looked back at her, gaze for gaze. Pidku, he willed to her. Pidku, a person, a boy, a human life, a life at stake. And then suddenly the contest was over. Mrs. Desai's hot eyes dropped. "All right," she said, "we are both human. If he should need still to pay, I will not stop." Ghote felt an absurd sense of happiness. It was as if, in boyhood, he had been given totally unexpectedly a free ticket to the cinema, and a whole sudden prospect of 3 hours of untrammelled, untouchable enjoyment had spread out before him. "Well, that is good, that is very good," he babbled. "If you would excuse me, I must stay in the flat because they may telephone at any instant, the kidnappers, any instant. They appear to have missed the last rendezvous they gave, you know. So they may get in contact. But I will go, I will remove myself elsewhere in the—" His incoherent jabber was interrupted by the sharp pealing of the front door bell. "Who can it be at this time?" Mrs. Desai said, snatching a sort of brightness round her, as if it was a garment hurriedly caught up. "Them," Ghote said, his heart suddenly pounding. "Them. They may have sent another messenger." He turned and was out of the room and into the hall in an instant. He found the proprietor of Trustex, his wide-shouldered body draped in a silk dressing-gown of a deep, magnificent green, just emerging, apparently, from his bedroom. He, too, it seemed, had been struck with the same thought about who this late caller might be. He glanced at Ghote apprehensively. The number 1 bearer appeared in his turn. Ghote hurried across and flattened himself against the wall next to the wide front door. "Please to let him in," he said. "I will make sure he does not leave some message and run away."
"Yes, yes," said the proprietor of Trustex. "That is the way. Are you ready?"
Ghote nodded his head in agreement.
"Then open," Mr. Desai instructed.
The bearer pulled the front door back with admirable suddenness. Ghote began a sideways sliding movement to get behind whoever should come across the threshold. And to his dazzled astonishment, he saw stepping calmly inside the Commissioner of Police for Greater Bombay. Chapter 14. Ghote flung out a hand against the wall beside him in an effort to stop his impetus-heavy sideways slide. His clawing fingers did at least slow his body down to the point where his other hand no more than lightly brushed the Commissioner's side. The Commissioner turned at the touch.
"Ah, Inspector Ghote," he said. "I'm glad to see you're still here. I heard that you were accompanying Mr. Desai somewhere. It seems you are being of use."
He gave Ghote a slight inclination of the head and turned his attention to the resplendent green-draped form of Moneybai Desai.
"My dear fellow," he said, "I fear I've dragged you from your bed. I'm sorry, but I was so anxious. Mina was anxious too, and so I said I would come round."
"Not at all, not at all," Moneybai Desai said.
"I am always delighted to see you. It is most kind."
He darted a quick look at his wife. It said, "You wait." Mrs. Desai did not wait.
"Commissioner," she said, "how good of you to come. But I hope I did not give a wrong impression on the telephone. I am standing right behind my husband in all this, you know."
Moneybai Desai's look of belligerence turned, almost comically, first to bewilderment, and then to a tiny flame of trust. The Commissioner gave Mrs. Desai a smile of great warmth and understanding.
"I'm sure you're 100% behind Moneybai in everything," he said heartily.
Mrs. Desai in turn smiled at him brightly. The Commissioner coughed.
"But I have come here to put you both absolutely in the picture," he said. "And you too, Ghote." "That is most kind," said the proprietor of Trustex, bending a little from the waist and clasping his large hands tightly together. "Shall we go into the drawing-room? You will take a drink, Commissioner?" Well, I cannot say that I am truly on duty," the Commissioner replied with a jovial laugh. For a few minutes there was much coming and going, with the bearer busily presenting his little silver tray. Ghote found that this time he was asked what he would have. He eagerly seized the chance of getting his cooling buttermilk. When he had it, and the bearer had left, the Commissioner looked all round. "Well now," he said, "this is what I came to tell you." The three of them sat forward expectantly. "We've got these fellows on the run," the Commissioner announced. "Definitely. And a smart piece of work it was too, though I say it of my own men." What had happened? Ghote wondered furiously. "Yes," said the Commissioner. "I thought when I put my Superintendent Karandikar onto the case that I couldn't have chosen a better man, and now I've proof of it. Do you know what he turned up? The tiniest thing, and I think it's going to put those blighters in the bag."
Mrs. Desai's eyes, in her miraculously restored to fixed prettiness face, widened in appreciation.
"Tell us," she cooed.
The Commissioner smiled.
"A tiny number of blue grains," he said. "That's what caught them. A tiny number of blue grains. When the lab boys on Karandikar's instructions gave that package the kidnappers sent a 100% check over, what did they find under the nail of the finger? A few blue grains. Exactly the same blue grains that were on the outside of the package. You see what that means?"
Ghote saw what it meant. He saw everything that it meant. But Mrs. Desai was still delightfully mystified.
"No, but Commissioner, you must tell us. This is fascinating. Absolutely."
Looking at her in a swift access of sourness, Ghote wondered whether the woman he had uncovered in this very room not quarter of an hour earlier had been only a dream, some sort of hallucination.
"Well," said the Commissioner in a kindly manner, "it's like this. That packet was brought here by a boy who we know lives in the immediate neighbourhood of a certain factory, the factory of Holy Tints Limited, Ghote supplied quietly. Of Holy Tints Limited, precisely. A factory that blows out over the whole area round a blue powder. Well now, if that same powder was found under the nail of that finger, then it indicates quite clearly that the kidnapped child is being kept somewhere not far from the factory. And you can bet your bottom dollar that as soon as the lab informed Superintendent Karandikar of that, he put a full-strength search operation into immediate effect. "And they have found where the boy is?" Mrs. Desai asked. "I have been so worried about that poor little mite." The Commissioner shifted a little in his raw silk-covered chair. "Well, the search is by no means completed yet," he said. "These things take a deuce of a long time. Every single house has to be investigated from top to bottom. And you know the sort of warren it is round there. It's a matter of look, and ask. "Yes," breathed Mrs. Desai. The Commissioner drained his glass. "Well, that's what I came to tell you," he said. "And so you can see there's absolutely no need to worry further. No need to, parley with those blighters, if you understand me." He directed at the proprietor of Trustex a look of keen inquiry. Ghote thought he knew what answer Moneyboy Desai was going to make, but there was no chance for the words to be uttered. Instead, into the big room there came shrilling yet once more the insistent call of the telephone. Moneyboy Desai cast an imploring look at Ghote. Please, it seemed to say, stop the ringing, stop it, let it not now be them. "Shall I answer?" Ghote asked, getting up and hurrying over to the white telephone. "We are expecting the kidnappers to call again. It may be them." Yes, man, jump to it," the Commissioner said. "I think you're the best one to deal with them. But don't give them an inch, not an inch." Ghote picked up the receiver. Before he had even time to say hello, the voice he had been sure he was going to hear was speaking. "Mr. Desai, is it?" "No," Ghote began. Tell him we could not meet on the way to KEM Hospital. Police followers were all round the place where we are. Now listen." "Yes?" Ghote's mind was darting across the facts of the situation, almost like a jungle beast fleeing from a fire, skittering wildly from point to point, unable to rest on any solidity. The first thing was not to say to the kidnappers that there was no longer any question of doing a deal with them. Those blue grains under little Pidku's nail, found thanks to his own insistence on sending the packet for analysis after all, might mean that the area where the boy was being held had been located. But the fact of the finger remained. Those men had hearts calloused enough to be able to take a child and cut off his finger. They had the ability to kill. He was certain of that. Yet with the Commissioner standing behind him, a presence emanating authority, it was a simple impossibility openly to bargain with the caller. The Commissioner had made it too plain that he backed to the hilt the hard line advocated by Superintendent Karandikar, that to offer money to kidnappers except with the definite intention of tricking them was to lay clear the path to an outbreak of crime of frightening proportions. And there was plenty to be said for that view, too. But since the kidnappers were even now calling the penthouse, did this not mean that they had escaped somehow Superintendent Karandikar's present search? It might mean it, certainly, especially if a new rendezvous was now offered, and if the kidnappers were, after all, in this stronger position now, then would it not be best to pay them? At least perhaps an attempt should be made. If the money was taken and Pidku not set free, then it would be a loss. But it would not be the unthinkable thing that would occur if he himself were now to say firmly, "No," and then that jagged knife be drawn across the soft-to-melting child's flesh. But even as Ghote's mind darted from point to point in this chain of reasoning, the flat-voiced kidnapper had been giving the new rendezvous. "At 9 tomorrow. He is to come alone. No chauffeur, no one. At 9 tomorrow morning at the Great Western Hotel again, and there he would be told. And if he is followed, then we would know. We would know, and in a moment we would kill. Understood?" "Wait," Ghote said, "wait." But the nervous, hasty man at the far end had jabbed down the receiver.
Had a squad of Superintendent Karandika's searchers just passed by whatever shop he was telephoning from? And Ghote was left with only the bare message. He turned and relayed it to Manibhai Desai and the Commissioner.
"Yes, yes," said the Commissioner. "Tightening round them, undoubtedly tightening round them. It won't be long now."
"But, sir," Ghote objected, his voice coming in a quiet gasp, "but he was able to get out and go to a telephone."
"A desperate measure, the Commissioner assured him.
And then the proprietor of Trustex added his conclusion.
"Yes, I am certain. It is excellent work, Commissioner. Those badmashis are nearly at the end of their rope. It is a good thing I did not pay out, as I had half a mind to do."
He thrust his hands into the deep pockets of his dark, silk-glowing emerald dressing-gown and waggled them luxuriously.
"But," Ghote said in a sudden, awkward semi-shout, "but you had said you would pay. The money is there."
He pointed to the battered, thick Gladstone bag, which was still resting where he had left it when he had brought it up to the penthouse after their fruitless trip to the KEM hospital.
"Listen, please," he went on, still jerking the words loudly out. "These men have no hearts. If they think they are on the point of arrest, they would kill." "Nonsense, man," said the Commissioner sharply. "They know the difference between hanging and 15 years R.I. They won't touch the child."
"Commissioner," the proprietor of Trustex put in with quietly growing smooth anger,
"I do not think we have any further need of Inspector Ghote. The case is almost cleared up. Those people will not trouble us now." Yes, quite right," said the Commissioner with quick cheerfulness. "Whole thing more or less wrapped up. Off you go home, Ghote. Report for duty at midday tomorrow. Dare say your wife will be glad to see you. Got a wife, haven't you?"
"Yes, sir," said Inspector Ghote. All Ghote could do was to follow the Commissioner's instructions and return home. But with every step, depression settled down on him until, well before he had entered the little square of garden in front of his small, boxy government quarter-house, he was levelled to a hopeless greyness. Manibhai Desai had dismissed him, and though once before he had sent him away and then had urgently called him back and begged for his advice, the proprietor of Trustex was not the sort of person who would go back on a decision twice. Indeed, it had been a wonderful reversal when he had brought himself to ask for help again after rejecting him the first time. Now, no hope of such a thing existed. And did this mean that Pitku was doomed? Back in the penthouse, when he had still been able to be rational about the business, he had argued to himself, while trying to sort out his thoughts in face of the kidnapper's last telephone call, that all was not necessarily lost for the tailor's boy. He had then been able to appreciate the Commissioner's argument that if, say, the searchers bungled the job of making a quick, clean arrest, the kidnappers would not risk making their punishment irrevocable death. Now he could no longer believe that. Greyness prevailed. He felt only that Pitku was bound to die. Absurdly, too, every little ordinary thing that his tired, groping mind bumped into seemed to be cast in this same hope-lost hue. For some reason the sight of his front door reminded him of the post delivery, and from that sprang ridiculously insistent thoughts about Protima's new supply of Trustex tablets. He felt convinced that they had not come. The fact that the proprietor of Trustex Manufacturing had backed out of his promise over Pitku seemed to make it certain that his firm too would have backed out of its pledge of prompt delivery. And at the same time, paradoxically, he became possessed of a total faith in the tablet's efficacy that he had never really had before. Without an absolutely continuing supply, he was certain, Protima would simply wither away. A gap of 1 day could be fatal. So, instead of creeping into the sleeping house in his usual manner and endeavouring to get to bed without causing any disturbance at all, no sooner had he got in and closed the door behind him than he burst out loudly and anxiously, "The Trustex tablets, have they come? Have they come?" In a moment, a startled and sleep-bemused Protima appeared from the bedroom, hugging her white night sari round her. "Ganesh, what is it? What is it?" The sight of her a little brought Ghote to his senses. "I am back home," he said, by way of rather sheepish explanation for the uproar he had made. Protima looked at him, blinking with effort in order to clear her mind. "You are well?" she asked. "Is anything the matter?" At once Ghote experienced a sense of quick irritation.
"Of course I am well," he snapped. "And what should be wrong? It is just that Mr. Desai of Trust X no longer requires my services." He had made a deliberate effort to get this to sound neutral, and he knew it still contained an understrain of bitterness. "But he has complained against you. What has he said?" Protima came leaping to his defence, her eyes now beginning to flash, and the colour mounting in her high cheekbones. "It is nothing, I tell you. And what I am asking is, have those tablets come yet?" "Tablets? What tablets?" Protima had been soundly asleep. "The Trust X. Has the new supply arrived? You should have finished the old card, even though you forgot one day. Has the new one come?" "What are you talking? It is the middle of the night. Trust X. What does Trust X matter at this time?" Ghote was at once seized with the most profound suspicions. She had not got the tablets, and already the lack of them was doing her harm. She would not have got into a rage like this if she had taken her regular dose. "Have they come?" he shouted. "Have they? Have they?" And the noise woke up little Ved, who came and stood sleepily in the doorway. "It is morning?" he asked. "I am late for school?" No, Protima said, sweeping down on him and enfolding him in an overprotective embrace. "It is the middle of the night only." "It is not the middle of the night," Ghote shouted. "It is quite early, and I am asking where is the new Trust X?" "They have not come, Pitaji," Ved said, his voice more piping for his having reverted in his sleepiness to a more childish stage. "Mataji was angry when the postman went by, and there was nothing." Yes, my little one," Protima soothed, "but go back to sleep now, back to sleep." She led him away. The darkest thoughts filled Ghote's head. The Trust X had not come. Protima would die. It was certain. And little Pidku would die, and he would be dismissed from the force himself. It was certain. "And you too should go to bed," Protima said, coming back. And coming back, with typical changeableness, a different woman. She put her arm round Ghote and shepherded him with warmth to their bedroom. He allowed himself supinely to be led, to be helped undress, to be questioned a little about the appalling events of the day, to be put to bed not knowing what the future held, or even what it could hold. Chapter 15. An insistent tapping on the shoulder awoke Ghote next day. For some seconds he refused to acknowledge that the blotting out of sleep had ended. He lay willing himself back into conquer-all dreamland. But the tapping, it seemed to be a thin blade being repeatedly brought down on his shoulder, continued insistently, and he realized too that a voice which he had been hearing was not part of his sleep life, mysteriously and automatically transformable into something that could be dealt with. It was from the outside. It was Ved, and the words he was chanting in rhythm to the tapping became suddenly clear. "The Trust X, the Trust X, the Trust X has come here. The Trust X, the Trust X, the Trust X has come here." Ghote sat sharply up. "What is that you're saying?" he demanded. But there was no need for Ved to tell him. He saw now that the boy was clutching in one hand the new square card of Trust X tablets grouped round their brightly printed dates. It had been this that had been tapping at his shoulder. He felt a sense of relief, even while acknowledging that his panic about the tablets the night before had been no more than panic, the wild exaggeration of a brain bemused by fatigue and the strain of a long day's nerve-harrowing events. "And look, Pitaji," Ved said, "they have changed envelope." Ghote answered, sleep temporarily billowing back at him now. From the front door of the little house, Protima called urgently. Ved, I said a moment only. You will be late for school." "It is so late?" Ghote called out, feeling suddenly rather cheerful. Yes, Protima called back. "You said last night that you did not have to go to office till midday. I hope it was right. You were so tired." Yes, the commissioner himself said." Ghote stretched luxuriously. "Ved, come on," Protima called again. "But Pitaji, look," Ved said with fearful earnestness, "a new colour of envelope."
And something stirring deep down in Ghote, something unrecognized, made him swing round and seize the envelope Ved had been holding in his other hand. And the moment he saw it fully, light swept in. It was an unusually shaped envelope, exactly square to fit the card it had contained. But whereas hitherto the plain cover under which Trust X had been sent had been of a good quality, pure white paper, now the firm had descended to using, in the same shape, a very coarse brown paper. So that this envelope was exactly like the envelope in which the kidnapper's first note had been delivered, the envelope that Moneyboy Desai had tossed away and which he himself had worried and worried about and had eventually cajoled the little Turk Hariboy to find. And if the kidnapper's envelope was exactly the same as that in which Trust X was now being sent, then one thing was likely to the point of near certainty, that the kidnappers themselves were employed somewhere in the factory of Trust X Manufacturing. Ghote's mind started to work with precise rapidity. First, had the kidnappers in any case already been arrested? Had Superintendent Karandika's sweep in the area, spreading out circularly from the works of Holy Tints Limited, been successful? "Quick," he said to little Ved, "off to school with you." And while the boy hopped and skipped away, understanding without a word being spoken that somehow the envelope he had shown his father had been a good piece of news, Ghote himself ran to his telephone. A quick dialing, CID headquarters for once answering immediately, and the duty sergeant's line not engaged. "It is Inspector Ghote here. Tell me something. Has Superintendent Karandika's new big bandobust been successful?" "Do not make me laugh, Inspector. The whole building is deserted. So many men he has on that job." "Just what I wanted to know. Thank you, bhai." Ghote crashed down the receiver. So the area in which Pitku was almost certainly being held was still being searched. Perhaps in the first flush of triumph somebody had missed some little thing quite near the Holy Tints factory. And the kidnappers were still unknown, which meant that Pitku was still in danger. Ghote looked at his watch. 10 minutes past 8. When, in an hour less 10 minutes, a call from the kidnappers to the Great Western Hotel revealed that the proprietor of Trust X was not there, as it was bound to do, then Pitku's life would hardly be worth a button. He ran back and scrambled into his clothes. Protima came in from having waved goodbye to Ved at the corner of the road. "You are in a great hurry for someone with all the morning to spend at home," she said. "No," said Ghote. "I am going as fast as I can to the Trust X factory. If what I have guessed is right, then perhaps I can learn there where those men are holding the tailor's little boy before they discover nobody is going to pay them any ransom and kill him." "You think they will?" Protima asked, a quick anxiety springing up in her to match his own. "If you had seen that finger," Ghote said, "you would not have any doubts." "Then hurry, hurry," Protima answered. And proof of her involvement, she did not even suggest he should take a cup of instant coffee or a bite of anything to eat. At the corner of the road, near the elite eating stall, he spotted the bright yellow and black of a taxi. Battering down all thoughts about how much it would cost, he hailed it and told the driver, a young and wild-looking Sikh, to go as fast as he could to the Trust X manufacturing works at Worli in the northern part of the city. He spent the traffic and mesh journey not glued to the meter of the cab, though he was twice unable to resist giving it a glance followed by some swift calculation in paisa and rupees, but in looking at his watch. At 9 o'clock, no doubt to the second as before, the kidnapper with that flat, threatening voice would ring up the Great Western Hotel from some shop or other. There could be no doubt that men of the kidnapper's sort would not have a telephone of their own, and would find that the proprietor of Trust X was not this time waiting for the call. Perhaps he would hang on for 2 or even 3 minutes. Perhaps he would try ringing a second time. The kidnappers, after all, must be as anxious to get hold of the huge sum they expected Moneyboy Desai to pay as the forces of order were to get hold of the kidnappers. But before all that long, it would be borne in on the telephone caller that Moneyboy Desai was deliberately not keeping the rendezvous. He might then even ring through to the penthouse to make doubly certain. But sooner or later he would report to the others that there was to be no money after all. And then what? a sweat broke out on the back of Ghote's neck as he envisaged the scene. A mutter of angry voices, possibly one of them urging patience. Someone from among the kidnappers had written of having some heart left after all. But eventually the decision would be taken. Faces would be hardened in worked-up anger. The joint move would come to whatever room or cupboard the little captive was being kept in. And then the quick rush to have it over and done with. "Faster, faster!" he said to the driver. The taximan, already causing more than his fair share of havoc in the streaming and counter-streaming traffic, became yet more aggressive. Angry shouts wafted after them. Do not mind, Ghote said. "I am CID. I would see you do not get into trouble." The promise appeared to carry some weight with the taximan, and the car nipped, dodged, and swayed onwards at the same dangerous rate, weaving through the lines of vehicles, screamingly braking and wildly swerving. But Ghote wondered how well-founded his promise was. He was not working under orders. He was simply rushing on his own initiative to get to Pidku, if he possibly could, before that 9 o'clock deadline. Deadline indeed. But was he justified in what he was doing? "Shoot those lights ahead," he ordered the taximan. Justified or not, he was going to go on. He was going to act first and find explanations afterwards if he could. The minutes ticked by and mounted up. Ghote forced himself not to let them blot out everything else in his mind. He clutched at the problem that would await him at his destination, a problem so impenetrable that he had not been able before to bring himself fully to contemplate it. But how, among perhaps 100 or more people employed by Trust X Manufacturing, was he to find the one, it might be one only, who had planned this appalling crime against the head of the firm? The envelope. He must work from that. How was it that this particular envelope had come to be used for the first note to Manibhai Desai? Plainly, it had been a mistake on the kidnapper's part, and they had been lucky not to have been tripped by the heels by it before this. Lucky for them that the proprietor of Trust X was now so successful that he no longer had time to exercise the close supervision of his whole enterprise that had once, it seemed, been his pride. He had mentioned, indeed, when making that offer of employment with the firm, that he had been unable for a long time to get round to visiting the goods outward department. So it might well be there that a search for the traitor within his gates could begin. Someone with access to the new brand of cheaper envelope. Well, it might be possible to do some eliminating there, if only there was time. Ghote looked at his watch yet again. Already 9:15. But at least they were getting near. They were getting near. This was the end of Globe Mill Road. Keep it up, he begged the taximan. There ought to be a foreman or somebody like that in the goods outward department, and a word from him might reveal in 1 second the presence, or more significant, the absence, of some person with a grudge against Manibhai Desai. Then a check at top speed with the wages department, an address, and he might still at least be on his way before that 9 o'clock call was made. He might. And surely even the kidnappers would not carry out their terrible threat within minutes of the situation requiring it finally arising. At last the taxi came to a halt at the gate in a high mesh fence that kept the brilliant white, sparkling new factory of Trust X Manufacturing from contact with the dirt-encrusted outer world. "From Mr. Desai, to see Mr. Shah." Ghote shouted the words at the tall Pathan gateman, magnificent in a green turban, finding they came to him without his even having to think. The name of the greasy-suited accountant was the only one he knew among all the employees of the big factory, and so he had produced it. But it was likely that there had been occasions in the past when the proprietor had had reasons to send an urgent messenger to the man who summed up in his single person the factory's whole accounts department. And it seemed that it was so. Straight on, the stiff-turbaned Pathan called with a brisk wave of his thick staff. The taxi drove into the factory compound and drew up in front of the main entrance. "Wait for me," Ghote said with urgency to the driver. It was likely, he reckoned, that if he did succeed in winkling out one of the kidnappers— but how? How was he to find one among 100 or more in just a few minutes? He would need to go at speed over to the immediate area of the Holy Tints factory. So transport had to be assured, and damn the cost. He ran quickly up a wide flight of steps, through swinging blued glass doors, and into the factory's reception area. Another Pathan, equally lordly in a splendid violet turban, stood there. Ghote tackled him in a sheer, overwhelming rush. "Police! CID!" he snapped the moment the glass doors had swung to behind him. "Your goods outward department, where is it? Quick!" "Through that door to your right, straight along the corridor. Then you will see a sign at the far end." Ghote, without stopping his onward rush, swung round and charged past a startled-looking girl at a reception desk and through the door the Pathan had indicated. Ahead, a long, wide corridor ran for perhaps 50 yards in a broad, straight path, its floor covered in soft, noise-deadening, squeaky green rubber. Plain wooden doors, painted white, with the names of the various departments on them in square, red lettering, giving a faintly hospital aspect, were blankly closed on either side. Ghote reached the far end in a little over 5 seconds. And there, to the left, was a pair of double doors marked in the same red, "Goods Outward." They clacked open with a satisfying noisiness as Ghote pushed at them with the palms of his extended arms. A large hall confronted him, 2 wide tables or benches running its whole length, set about 8 or 9 feet apart. In the passageway which they formed, there were some 20 or more women, busy dealing with supplies of Trustex in various stages of packing, pushing them along until at the end of one of the tables baskets of envelopes awaited delivery to the post office, while at the end of the other, neat wooden boxes of cards, bundled and tightly stacked, were ready to be taken to shops where the tonic was sold. Women, Ghote thought, looking down the 2 rows of industrious, stooping, sari-clad figures. It was a reasonable first bet that no woman was involved in as nasty and heartless a business as kidnapping. His look swept round the rest of the long, high-ceilinged room. On the outside of the 2 parallel packing tables, various necessary supplies were being brought to the points where they would be used by some 8 or 9 coolies. One of these? It was likely enough. His eyes raced over the men with their baskets of unfilled envelopes and trays of monthly cards. Was there one with a red check shirt? After all, men doing this sort of work did not change every day, or even every week, from a shirt of one colour to one of another. They were as likely as not to possess just the one garment, getting their wives to wash it in one night and wearing it again next morning. So, a red-checked, shirted man? But there was no one. Who was in charge? A brawny fellow of about 50 with a round, voluble, fat face, dressed in a colourful purple shirt above a bright red dhoti, was moving briskly here and there in the big room. Ghote went quickly up to him. "Are you the foreman of this department?" he asked sharply. The big, wide-chested man laughed. "Oh, yes," he said, "I am in charge of a pack of girls and women who leave me no peace." His eyes twinkled. "And the coolies?" Ghote asked. "They leave you no peace either? They are discontented?" Again the foreman laughed, richly from the chest. "When they are my relatives only, all but one," he said. "No, they have good jobs here, my cousins and my cousins' cousins. We are not having strikes always." "And they are all related to you? All but one, you said. What about him? He is an odd man out?" "Ha-ha!" the foreman laughed, and gave himself a double-handed slap on either side of his dhoti-covered belly. "That one is going to marry my daughter, the last girl I have to marry, and he is going to take her. A good boy, too, a good boy." "I see," Ghote said with despondency. He was wondering whether perhaps he ought not after all to ask some questions about the female packers. Had he been too simple to think that no woman could act as cruelly as the kidnappers? When the foreman gave him a quick, acute look from a face still wreathed in smiles. "But what is all this about, Saab, if I may ask?" he said. "You seem to think someone here has done something wrong." Ghote decided to trust him, a sudden, instinctive plunge. "It may not be in this department," he said, "but someone in the firm has done something wrong indeed, unless I am much mistaken." "You are police, Saab?" the foreman asked. "CID," Ghote answered. "Then it is this terrible thing that has happened to the tailor who worked for Mrs. Desai," the foreman concluded. His eyes darkened with concern. "Exactly.
And I have reason to believe that someone—" Ghote's voice trailed into silence. A clear notion of who that someone was had floated abruptly into his head. The idea may have come from some hidden-away emotional reaction to the warmth of the foreman's personality, or it may have come simply because his mind, having completed its consideration of the kidnapper in the factory as being one of the rough members of the gang, switched to asking whether the person he was seeking might not be the hypothetical mastermind behind the whole affair. But whatever the reason, the idea had come into being in his head as clear and as definite as if it had been the result of a long chain of closely considered ratiocination. As, in a way, it was. The salient point in his picture of the supposed mastermind had always been one thing: that someone had fixed with such accuracy on the sum of 20 lakhs of rupees as the maximum possible amount the proprietor of Trust X would be able to scrape together to ransom his own only son. Added to this, there had been the skill shown in the drafting of the various plans the kidnappers had put forward for picking up the money without risking being arrested. But there had also been another element, a hint of indirectness in control. The main plans had been drawn up with skill, but details of their execution, things like the envelope and the occasional indecision shown by the man on the telephone, had indicated more than once a clear lack of close control from the top. Ghote thought now that he knew why this was. Plainly, the kidnappers were operating from whatever place it was near the colour-spreading Holy Tints factory, where they were hiding Pitku, but no doubt the mastermind was not able to be there at all times. Quite simply, he had to be at work. And if he was a senior employee of Trust X Manufacturing, which of all the people at the factory would know most clearly about the proprietor's exact financial state, but the man who in himself constituted the whole accounts department, the bullied and put upon Mr. Shah. Ghote, flinging out thanks to the genial foreman, left at a run. With every stride he took, he became more and more convinced that the man he was about to tackle would be able to tell him exactly where Pitku, frightened, maimed, 5-year-old Pitku, was being kept. In the brightly coloured, fresh-looking reception area, he again demanded directions from the Pathan Chaprasi with a sharpness that could not be denied. Yes, the accounts department was easy to find. It was on the upper floor, just next to the proprietor's own office, and that was directly above them now. "Through those doors there, Sab. Up the stairs, and accounts you would see on your right." Ghote took the stairs 2 at a time, and with each bounding step he let the anger within himself leap higher. Then he saw the sign saying "Accounts" painted on a narrow glass-panelled door 10 yards along from the luxurious wood veneer affair, with a board bearing the legend, "Chairman and Managing Director, Strictly Private." He swerved towards it, and without knocking or giving a moment of warning, he flung it open. Mr. Shah was sitting behind a cheap desk at the far end of a little, high-ceilinged corridor of a room, its walls shelved and heavy with great leather-bound account books. He looked exactly as he had done when Ghote had first seen him 2 days ago. That greasy suit seemed folded in exactly the same encrusted creases, and the very threads at its cuffs appeared to dangle thickly at the very same angles. His large, horn-rimmed spectacles sat in their same filmed-over state, at a slightly crooked angle on the small, anonymous nose in the centre of that cross-lined, fleshless, anonymous face. He looked up, with a quick, tree-rat dart of fear, when Ghote stepped into the narrow, book-walled room. But when he saw who it was who had come in, his glance dropped again to the long, heavy ledger in front of him, and he immediately made an entry in it with the fat old fountain pen he was holding. "It is the police inspector who was with Mr. Desai," he said, his mind already more than half fixed again on the columns of figures in front of him. "It is a message from Mr. Desai." "No," said Ghote clearly and loudly. He marched up to the small desk and stood glaring down at the accountant across it. "No," he repeated, cracking the word down. "It is you I have come to see, Mr. Shah."
The accountant looked up at him sharply, his eyes peering speculatively up through the grease-filmed glasses. "Well, Inspector," he said, "it is Inspector Ghote, isn't it? Is there truly something that I can do for—" Ghote banged both his hands down flat on the little cheap desk so that it shuddered, and the telephone at its corner gave a tiny ping. He leant forward until his face was within inches of the lined, cross-furrowed, secretive face of the accountant. "Where is the boy?" he shouted. "Where are you keeping him?" He was able to see, so close he was, the minute flicker of fear in the eyes behind the big filmy spectacles. The minute flicker of fear and, was it an even more minute flicker of calculation? "Inspector, is something wrong? I do not at all understand what it is that you are—" Ghote hit him. He had not in the least expected to, but the stream of bland words that had begun to slide out in answer to his question offended him like an exquisite insult. And he had swung upright above the little desk, and quick as a lion's paw, his right hand had shot out and landed a heavy blow on the side of Mr. Shah's head. It sent him tumbling from the creaky bentwood chair on which he had been crouching over his long ledger. He fell sideways onto the floor, banging his shoulder against the wall of the narrow room. And he lay there. "Get up," Ghote said. Cautiously the accountant scrabbled onto his knees, his left hand sweeping round in a half-circle seeking the horn-rimmed spectacles which had flown off the bridge of his nose. "Where are you keeping the boy?" Ghote demanded again. Mr. Shah got fully to his feet. He had found the spectacles, but he made no attempt to put them on. "You are assaulting me," he said. His voice was steady, and Ghote realized with thankfulness that he had not done him any serious harm. It was not that he did not want to. He wanted to stand over the grimy-suited figure and batter him down time and again to the ground. But he knew that this would only give a defense lawyer ammunition, and besides, he was not going to get any information out of his man if he himself was blind with red rage. So he took a long, deep breath before speaking. "Yes, Mr. Shah," he said then, his tone as steady as his opponent's now. "Yes, I am assaulting. You have heard tales of police brutality, I dare say. Well, would you like to find out if they are true?" "Oh, no, you will not," the accountant answered, his eyes sparking ice. "I am not the sort you can do that to. I am protected. I work very closely with Mr. Desai, who is a personal friend of the Commissioner of Police." "Mr. Desai," Ghote countered, still keeping his voice level, "whose only son you plan to kidnap." The accountant's unexpressive face went yet more stonily uncommunicative. "Inspector," he said, "I do not know what wild idea you have got into your head, but I would be very interested to hear what evidence you have for that claim." Ghote saw with a sudden pit of emptiness opening in front of him that he had rushed impetuously into a very dangerous situation. He had accused a member of the public of a serious offence without a jot of hard evidence to back him up. He had behaved not like a police officer, but like an unthinking fool. Should he try to climb out of it, say he had not said what he plainly had, mutter excuses, cringe and apologize? But then he knew that he would not. Mr. Shah was the person who had planned the kidnapping of Haribhai Desai, and worse, who, when that had gone wrong, had committed the double cruelty of demanding a huge sum against the life of the son of a hopelessly poor man. Evidence might be lacking at present, but he himself had seen the little look of speculation in those eyes behind the greased-over horn-rimmed glasses, and was experiencing now the cold triumph the man was exuding. Shah was the mastermind. He was, and he was not going to get away with it. "Mr. Shah," he said, "you have no need to play those sort of tricks with me. I have reason, and good reason, to know that you are the man who planned the kidnapping. It is your accomplices who are holding that boy even now. Where are they?" "Inspector, already I have warned—" Mr. Shah stopped. The greying black telephone on the corner of his cheap little desk was ringing hard. "Inspector," he said, "you can see I am a busy man. I have the whole accounting system of this firm to keep running." He gave a pointed glance at the door which Ghote had left swinging open behind him, and reached across the desk for the telephone receiver. Ghote stood his ground. But the accountant did not allow his presence to put him off. He brought the receiver to his ear and spoke in a clipped, businesslike manner that was only a little exaggerated. "Trust X Manufacturing Accounts Department. It is Mr. Shah speaking." "He did not go to hotel." Chapter 16. It had been only 6 words, but they were enough to change totally the situation for Ghote. Only 6 words coming distortedly through the earpiece of the greying telephone on the corner of Mr. Shah's desk. But Ghote had heard them clearly, and had recognized beyond doubt the voice that had spoken them. It was more excited and disturbed than he was used to hearing it, but it was the flat voice he had first listened to on the telephone in the hall of the Desai penthouse, and had heard on 4 other brutally impressing occasions since. It was the voice of the kidnapper's spokesman, informing the mastermind of their enterprise that Mr. Desai had not been at the Great Western Hotel to get his instructions for the final rendezvous. "Later!" Mr. Shah hissed into the telephone, the power of his suppressed fury making the hushed word almost into a shout. He crashed the receiver back onto its rest, but Ghote's hand descended almost as quickly to clasp his wrist like a steel trap. He jerked it up and twisted it in an instant behind the greasy-suited accountant's back. "Now," he said, letting the hatred rip in his voice, "talk, and talk fast, Mr. Shah. Where is the boy being kept?" "I do not know, Ghote gave the arm he was twisting a sharp little jab upwards. The accountant let out a breathy yelp of pain. "Am I going to force it out of you?" Ghote demanded. "Inspector, you are making a miss—" This time Ghote gave the arm a more savage push up towards the shoulder-blade above it. The accountant gave a long, sobbing moan. "No, stop." "Talk, then." "It is a room behind a pan shop, in a lane in Bulashwar. It is called Babuji Lane. It is the pan shop there." A dark song of triumph started up in Ghote's head. He had done it. He had done it. The Holy Tints factory was in Bulashwar. Shah must be telling the truth, and he himself had fought his way to the secret concealed among all the employees of Trust X Manufacturing. But had he done it in time? It must be just after 9 now, since Shah had been told that Mr. Desai had not gone to the Great Western Hotel. No doubt, had that call gone on, Shah would have been asked what the men holding Pidku should do now. Perhaps he would have been asked for his casting vote on whether to kill the boy at once. Well, luckily he had simply told his accomplice to ring back later. So there ought to be a little time, but there would not be much. "Right," he said to the wretched, moaning accountant. "You are going to come with me, and quickly." Still keeping an implacable grip on his right wrist, he swung him round the desk and marched him out of the still gaping door. At a sharp trot they descended together to the glossily smart reception area. There, Ghote offered no explanations, but simply propelled his captive across the highly polished floor and out through the blue glass swinging doors. Let the Pathan chaprasi and the elegant receptionist behind her counter make what they would of the firm's accountant departing in this humiliating way. They would soon enough learn the truth about him. Outside, in the bright morning sunlight, the taxi was still waiting, the young Sikh at the wheel happily puffing a cigarette. The meter, Ghote thought in an incidental flash, must by now have clocked up a formidable sum. As he bundled the accountant in ahead of him, he shouted an order to make for Bulashwar as fast as possible. And then he realized with a little jump of pleasure that now he ought to be able to charge the whole trip to expenses. For the first part of the journey, plunging southward from the sea-touched spaces of Worli to the close, confined, crowded sweat-pit of Bulashwar, Ghote devoted all his energies to extracting from the cowed accountant every detail of his plot that might be helpful in dealing with the other members of the gang in their hideout clustered round Little Pidku. He hardly noticed, indeed, as his Sikh driver swung in and out of the now lessening traffic, that at one stage they had worked their way round Jacob Circle again, within 100 yards or so of the little Great Western Hotel and its telephone that had figured so prominently in the affair. Instead, he battered without remorse at the greasy-suited Shah. How many others were involved in the business? What were their names? How had they become involved? Ah, so there had also been another of them working at Trust X, in the stores, and no doubt light-fingered with the supply of new envelopes. Had any of them records of violence? Did they carry any weapons? Had they hidden Pitku in the same place all along? How had they evaded Superintendent Karandika's searches? Had they planned to take the boy to a new hiding place if Mr. Desai had agreed once more to pay them? Were they finding it difficult to move about with so many police in the area? From these and other questions banged out in the swaying back of the taxi, Ghote learnt a good deal. There were, it seemed, only 3 people involved besides the accountant. The others were, as he himself had suspected, 3 pretty rough individuals: the storeman, whom Shah had first picked on to help him when he had detected him in a pilfering racket, and 2 of his friends. They were certainly likely to have weapons of some sort, though the accountant did not think that they had any firearms. And yes, by dint of hiding Pitku in a storage box in the garden at the back of the pan shop, they had escaped the massive search that had taken place the night before. And now they had been planning to move on, though they had not thought it would be easy. "And the boy? And Pitku?" Ghote asked. "Now that they have not been able to get in touch with you, what will they do?" "I do not know." But the crouching accountant looked so doubly frightened as he said this that Ghote guessed the worst was likely to take place. "You must know," he said, putting his face close to his prisoner's and slamming the words into him like blows. "Inspector, I swear—" "They have all along been ready to kill, yes, yes?" The accountant put his hands up to his eyes. "Yes," he whispered, "they would kill." Ghote swung away. "Go faster," he said to the taximan. "Inspector?" Shah said from behind him. The tone was sickeningly ingratiating. Ghote could hardly bring himself to respond. "Well?" "Inspector, it would help if I told you how the pan shop can be approached from the rear." Ghote swung back round on the bouncing, swaying seat. "Help or not," he said, not disguising his disgust, "you are going to tell, and quick." "But, Inspector, you saw how Mr. Desai used to treat me. Inspector, I was less than a pie dog to him. Can you wonder I used my knowledge to make him feel?" The accountant slipped half off the seat in an ecstasy of grovelling. His lined, featureless face twitched and twitched. "You did more than make him feel," Ghote said inflexibly. "You have nearly stamped the life out of another father, a poor man you knew nothing of." "But Mr. Desai had to be made to pay," the accountant answered, another terrible twitch distorting his whole face. "And the boy's finger had to be cut off to make him pay?" Ghote said. A wild look, raging and flaming, came into his prisoner's spectacleless eyes. "Yes," he said, "yes, even at that cost. Something was needed to stab him to the heart." And the depth of hatred that this revealed, like a black root torn out, made Ghote see that indeed the mastermind of the kidnap gang, for all the cold cunning he had used, had not been set on at the start by any frigid calculation. Yet, whatever glimpse of sympathy this made him feel for him, he was not going to let his purpose now be deflected. "You said there was a back way to pan shop. What is it? Answer up, or it will be the worse for you." "It is a passage," the accountant blabbed out. "It is a passage from the lane that runs parallel. It does not look as if it leads anywhere. There is a pile of rubbish, a chicken coop, but you can get over, and then you are in the gardens between the 2 rows of houses. It is easy to get from one to the other." "And the pan shop?" Ghote said. "How do you know when you have reached its garden?" "That is easy, Inspector. The shop garden is used for storing bales of beetle leaves for the pans. There is no difficulty, I promise. Ghote looked at his babbling prisoner without pity, but in a moment he turned and spoke to the Sikh driver. "Do you know Babuji Lane in Buleshwar?" "Ji, Sahab." "Good. Then take the next turning past it, another lane, and stop when I tell you." Ghote turned and put his head out of the taxi window. He was looking for a traffic policeman. What the blubbering Shah had told him about the back way to the pan shop garden, the garden in which little Pitku must actually be hidden, had given him an idea. If he could hand over the accountant to somebody reliable, and at the same time get a message to Superintendent Karandika to say where the kidnappers were, then he could allow himself, before one of the superintendent's heavy-footed squads descended on the pan shop, to slip in by the rear and be ready perhaps simply to protect Pitku, perhaps even to rescue him. If he managed that, while he was at the same time in a position to cut off the kidnapper's retreat should it be necessary, then he would have amply justified his taking of the initiative. Only where was there a traffic man? They were not far from Bawuji Lane now. Well, if the worst came to the worst, he could tell the taximan to stop and then send him to telephone a message to Superintendent Karandika while he waited himself in the taxi with the... No. There. Some 30 yards ahead, he spotted a traffic constable, a steady-looking veteran with a big grey moustache, a model of neatness and discipline, puttees above his sandals faultlessly rolled, yellow tunic crisp and uncrumpled, the black leather criss-cross straps and belt over it glinting dazzlingly in the sun. "Pull up by that constable there," he said to his driver. The Sikh grinned. "You are going to give me in charge for reckless, Sahib?" he asked. "No," Ghote said. "I am going to pay you damn well out of public funds." As he took out his wallet and began counting notes, the Sikh brought the taxi to a halt just where the constable stood. The grizzle-moustached veteran appreciated the situation the moment Ghote explained. "Very good, Inspector Sahib," he said. "I will take this fellow to the chowki just as fast as he can march. There I will telephone ekdam to Superintendent Karandika and tell him it is the pan shop in Bawuji Lane. I know it well. Their pans have so little in them, it is like having a piece of American gum only." He laughed with brisk joviality and jerked the wretched Shah out of his seat in the car and onto the pavement. Then, holding his arm in a hair-matted hand that was like an animal clamp, he bustled him unceremoniously away. Ghote, too, set off at a fast walk, judging that even with the pavements as crowded as they were, it would be quicker to go on foot than get the taxi to drive further on. In a few moments he came to the entrance to Bawuji Lane and glanced up it. He thought he could catch a glimpse of the open front of the pan shop about halfway along. He almost expected to see one of the searching squads of uniformed constables noisily barging into it, with little Pidku at the back still unprotected. But in fact there was no one other than the milling everyday throng all along the crowded length of the lane. He hurried on, and when he came to the next turning, he could hardly restrain himself from breaking into a run as he went up along the narrow lane in search of the seemingly blocked passageway the accountant had told him about. Only the thought that a run would draw unnecessary attention and perhaps warn the kidnappers kept him down to a walking pace. People of all sorts, idling, squatting, sleeping, walking, stopping to haggle, stopping to gossip, taking time to revile and curse one another, blocked his way. He barged and pushed past them. He twisted and wriggled. And all the time he kept glancing forwards and back, measuring and estimating the distance he had traversed, calculating how much further he would have to go till he came level with the pan shop and could expect to find the narrow passageway. A mooning cow with a vile, slobbery strip of mango peel dangling 3/4 of the way out of its mouth lumbered straight up towards him. He gave it a vicious push and shoved his way past. And then, just as he had decided that he must have somehow missed seeing the passage, over across on the other side where another lane turned off at a right angle, something caught his eye, and then sent a thump of joy through him that stopped him dead in his tracks. The whole end of the short cul-de-sac by-lane was stained a vivid and unlikely blue, from the broken stones of its footway to the tops of the dark, tumbling houses on either side. The wall blocking its end, he decided still joyously, must be, in fact, the wall of the Holy Tints factory itself. So, the back of the pan shop on the other side of this lane would be only just within range of the blowing blue powder. And that would be why that finger had had only a few grains of blue under its nail. So, this must be the right spot. And yes, there on the left was the passageway. The sunlight pouring onto the faces of the houses on either side had made it hard to see, but once spotted, the dark black slit was impossible to miss. He did break into a run now. A dog, slinking along by the vile-smelling street drain, nosing for something to gnaw at, got under his feet. He nearly fell, recovered, and plunged into the passage entrance. It took him several moments to adjust his eyes to the darkness which seemed at first almost as thick as night despite the strip of hard, blue, sunlit sky above. But at last he was able to make out where he had to go. Yet when he did so, his heart almost failed him. The way ahead seemed totally blocked. There was a tall, battered hen-coop round which there pecked and squabbled half a dozen dispirited chickens. Beyond that was a mound of indistinguishable rubbish, topped by an old barrel with half its side knocked out. The whole was the better part of 5 feet high. He remembered, however, what the miserable Shah had said, and pressed on. Past the coop he was able to see over the rubbish barrier, and sure enough, the passageway did continue. He scrambled his way up the mound of rotting ordure, getting his trousers stained appallingly up to and beyond the knees. But he was able to get over, and he staggered gratefully down the last few yards of the passageway. He came out, as the accountant had said he would, into a small garden, if garden such a dirt patch could be called, bounded by low, crumbling walls. Which way to go? He decided that probably he should backtrack a little, and turned his attention to the low wall on his left. There was no difficulty getting over. Moving cautiously so as to avoid, if possible, attracting the attention of any of the people living in the houses on either side, who might well be more in sympathy with the lawbreakers than with the forces of order, he crossed the garden he had got into and peered over its far wall. And yes, surely there, 2 gardens further on, were some soft, springy-looking bundles that might well contain new supplies of beetle leaves for the pan shop. He hurried on, and at the next wall was able to confirm by the clean, tangy smell cutting over the prevailing low stench that he was indeed within a few yards of his destination. For a second he stood, crouching so that only his eyes came above the level of the dilapidated wall in front of him, and surveyed the pan-shop garden and the back of the house itself. It did not take him long to find what he first sought. Up against the wall of the house there was a small, lean-to shelter made from heavy timber. There must be the place where Pitku was hidden. He hardly blamed the searchers for leaving it out of account. It was only some 4 feet high, and had evidently been built just as a store place, good enough to keep out the rain. But confirming to him that what was in it now was valuable indeed, there was on its lid a heavy chunk of broken concrete secured with rough wire. It would quite obviously be a great deal too heavy to be lifted by a boy of 5. With one last glance round to make sure no one seemed to be taking particular interest in his activities, Ghote crossed the remaining distance, separating him from the pan-shop's garden. He heaved himself over the last wall and moved rapidly across to the wooden bunker, every step confirming his observation that it was indeed what he had been looking for. When he reached it, he saw, as he hoped, that it was only the weight of the broken-edged concrete block that was keeping the close-fitting wooden lid in place. He shut his eyes for an instant, took a quick, deep breath, clasped the front edge of the thick lid, and heaved both it and the wired-on block upwards. At first, the inside of the bunker, which must have measured about 4 feet across each way, as well as in depth, seemed totally black. But then there was a tiny movement, almost as if a light breeze had disturbed a bit of old rag and had faintly fluttered it. Ghote bent forward, peering with every degree of force he could bring to his eyeballs. And yes, there, lying at the bottom of the bunker, was a child. But what a child! As Ghote's eyes grew bit by bit accustomed to the darkness inside the bunker, he was able to make out all the details. Always in his mind's eye he had pictured little Pitku as an attractive boy, a pleasanter pair to Haribai, chubby and well cared for, with glossy hair and a smiling, lively, fragile-skinned face. The only son of a father as devoted as the tailor would have such a boy, despite his poverty, he had thought. But the child lying crouched sideways on the earth floor of the bunker, although from the ball of dirty and knotted rag round his right hand he must be beyond doubt little Pitku, was as far removed from the boy of his mind's eye as it was possible to be. He was no longer dressed in the latest fashion straight from the shops, clothes that he had, so long ago it seemed now, mischievously exchanged with his rich friend Haribai. Instead, he was naked, and his limbs, that ought to have been rounded and sturdy, seemed scrawny as a half-starved chicken's. He was dirty, too. The whole top half of his legs was covered with mess, and the face that looked slowly up to the light, blank with fear, was in no way the face Ghote had so often pictured under the horny hand of the knife-threatening kidnapper. Instead, it was grimy, mucus-smeared, and already blotched with sores. Ghote, peering down at the little prince who had hovered at the end of his quest, found that he could not produce the least fraction of that well-springing of joy that ought to have burst from him. Only a very slight feeling of disgust manifested itself at the sight of the repulsive object moving mutely on the messy floor of the bunker. But this was Pitku, and the paramount thing was to complete his rescue. Ghote leant well forward into the bunker, ignoring the rancid smell that entered his nostrils like dagger thrusts. "It is a friend," he whispered. "I am going to take you quickly to your Pitaji." But there was hardly anything that could be seen as a delighted reaction from the scrawny, apathetic captive at the bottom of the bunker. "Up we come," Ghote said, putting all the reassurance he could muster into the words, as he leant further in and slipped his right arm round the boy's terribly small chest. He lifted him. The burden was disconcertingly light and insubstantial, up and out of the bunker, and thankfully closed its heavy lid. "Now," he said, "we must be quiet while we go. It is only over a few walls and along a passage, and then we will be safe." Putting his feather-light, precious, dirt-encrusted and offensively smelling burden across his shoulder, he turned and prepared to clamber across the wall beside him. And it was then that he saw, across the intervening gardens, just emerging from the passageway, a big, bearded man who, in the moment that he glimpsed him, appeared to have no hands. Chapter 17. The glimpse Ghote had of the bearded man as he looked at him across the gardens between them was extraordinarily clear, and it put into his mind at once and absolutely the conviction that he could be none other than the driver of the car that had taken Haribai Desai and Pitku, the man Haribai had described as having no hands. For a long, seeming moment, Ghote stood stock still, his scrawny burden reversed over his shoulder. And in that instant he was able to work out that of course the bearded man was not handless, but he was one-handed, and from the angle he had seen him, his one good hand had been hidden, as it must have been too when Haribai had been briefly in the kidnapper's car. So the garbled description Haribai had given in the nursery of the penthouse had unexpectedly served its turn in providing a necessary warning. Ghote quietly and slowly knelt down till he himself and his precious burden were safely concealed under the shelter of the garden wall. Was this fellow? He would be the Muslim one. Shah had used his name. Yes, Muhammad Israel. Was he coming to warn the others that a search party was near again? Hardly. The searchers would have got much further than this from the Holy Tin's factory now. No, more likely he was coming to help them whisk their captive to the new hiding place. Or would it be to help them to escape, leaving the captive to be found dead? In any case, before very long, he would be in the garden here. Should he make a bid for escape while there was still a little time? But the chances of getting clear were nil. The Muslim could easily outpace him, hampered as he would be by Pitku, and would be bound to recognize what his burden was. Could he go forward and dodge past him? The passageway and the safety of the crowds beyond it was not so far away. Or could he surprise the fellow and put him out of action? Possibly, if he was on his own. With Pitku over his shoulder, there was not a hope. So there was only one thing for it. "Listen," he hissed at Pitku, swinging him round and trying to suppress the anxiety he felt. "Listen, for a little I am going to put you back where you were, but do not worry, soon we will go." It seemed that a faint light of understanding did show in that filthy and sore-blotched face, though the boy said nothing. Ghote carefully raised his head and saw that the Muslim was busy crossing a wall. With quiet speed he reopened the bunker and lifted Pitku gently into it. Still the boy did not make a sound. To lower the heavy lid was quick agony. The thought of darkness closing in again on the captive was almost too much to bear, but it had to be done. After it, Ghote gave a quick look over towards the Muslim, but it was plain the fellow had spotted nothing amiss. So he hurled himself into the narrow space between the side of the bunker and the garden wall, which he had seen in a flash as a hiding place, and crouched there, fighting to control his breathing. He was not well concealed. He was hardly concealed at all. But provided the Muslim swung himself over this garden wall in the same fashion as he had done with the wall he had been getting across before, then he ought not to see him, unless the fellow chose to linger in the garden. But if he did not, if it passed off safely, what then? If the Muslim went into the house, would it be safe to get Pitku out again and risk making a getaway? How long would it be before the grey-moustached traffic constable got a message to Superintendent Karandikar? It surely would be some time yet. So, if the Muslim did go right into the house, Ghote tensed like a twang-hidden spring as he came over the wall, mercifully bending away from the bunker and with his handless arm swinging high. Then he would take the risk and try to make a dash for it with Pitku. And yes, he had walked straight over to the door into the house, which lay a little recessed from the wall against which the bunker had been built. The sound of a knocking. Evidently the door must be locked. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. It sounded like a code signal. Now the door was being opened. That must be the shriek of a tight bolt. He would give a lot to be able to see exactly what was happening, but he did not dare even peer above the top of the bunker. The house door was not very far back from the wall behind him, and the Muslim might easily have stepped away from it to a position from which he could see the bunker itself. "Ah, it is you, Mohammed," the flat voice of the man on the telephone. He was more relaxed here, but there was no mistaking him. "Yes, it is me. Who else did you think it would be?" "The car is there? Ready and waiting. I will tell Sudhir. Did you get through to the great Mr. Shah this time?" "They said he was not answering his telephone." "Then we will not wait. I will bring Sudhir. We will deal with the boy and then go. After that we can telephone to that paper and tell them where to look for the body." Okay, but hurry." Crouching between the side of the bunker and the crumbling garden wall with every muscle taut, Ghote did not need to consider the conversation he had heard. It was all too clear. The three of them were about to make their escape clear away from the danger area, happy that the hunt seemed to have passed them by. They had decided that they would never now get their 20 lakhs from the proprietor of Trust X, and they were going brutally to kill Pitku so as to soften up the parents of a new victim. And, crouching still, Ghote found that he did not need either to consider what he himself was going to do. He was going to make a fight for it. He eased himself up, centimetre by centimetre, ready to leap clear if he heard the slightest indication that the one-handed Muslim was standing far enough back to see him. But if he could get fully to his feet unseen, he might perhaps be able to tackle this one antagonist and put him out before the other two got back. Perhaps then he would stand a chance of getting out of this alive. He was under no illusion that it was indeed his life that he was about to risk. To take on these men at the very moment they were about to kill for their own profit was, quite simply, courting death, or at best being left for dead. Well, at least it seemed the Muslim must be standing close to the door in a position where he could be taken by surprise. But the chances of success were minimal still, he knew. Unarmed, to launch himself onto men, each of whom was likely to be carrying a weapon, and none of whom would hesitate to use it, was tantamount to flinging himself down a well in suicide. But it had to be done. He could not sneak away and leave that scrawny, stinking, soiled boy to die. Because Pitku was the future. He was unproven. He might rise to anything, while he himself had undergone the tests. And he had been proved, like most others in the world, to be mixed metal. There was no choice. 1, 2, 3. Noiselessly he propelled himself in the direction of the hidden door. If only the big Muslim would turn out to have his back. He checked himself in blank amazement as the door came in sight. There was nobody there. Immediately the explanation came to him. Simple enough. The Muslim had not waited, but had strolled in through the open door. No doubt he had thought the other two had been taking too much time. What to do? Too risky to try to make a getaway with Pitku. That bunker lid was noisy. Hide flat up against the wall beside the door so as to gain maximum surprise? That would pay best. He went quickly over. From inside the house he could hear muffled voices now. They seemed to be disputing over something. Was one of the other two having last-second doubts? Was he the one who still had some heart left? Dare he himself risk going for Pitku after all? No. Footsteps. Hurrying, heavy footsteps. He braced himself. And then, out into the sunlight of the little cluttered garden, in swift, tiger-like strides, there came Superintendent Karandikar. "No!" he called back loudly. "No one making off this way!" He swung round to re-enter the house. Sir," said Inspector Ghote. "Ghote? What are you doing here, man?" "You did not get my message, Superintendent Sahib." "Message? What message?" "I sent a message by a traffic constable, Superintendent, to say I had discovered where they were keeping Pitku, keeping the kidnapped boy, Superintendent. But I did not think you would be able to get here so soon." "I know nothing about any of that, Inspector. And I am none too certain I like your presence here. I was conducting a personal second check on every doubtful building in the area, and the men we found in the back of the house here started to cut up rough, so I knew we had struck gold." He swung away and called back into the house again. "You have found the boy? No harm done, eh?" "He is here, Superintendent Sahib," Ghote said. "In here." He went over to the bunker and lifted the heavy lid. Superintendent Karandikar came over and peered in beside him at the small, uneasily moving figure down at the bottom. He grunted dubiously. He straightened up and took a pace back. "You had better go and find a telephone and get hold of a police ambulance, Inspector," he said. "We will have to get him taken to hospital, if only to see he gets a thorough wash." "Yes, sir," said Ghote. He put his arm down into the bunker and once more pulled out the scrawny, feather-light, unprepossessing bundle that was little Pitku. "Now everything is all right again," he said to him. The boy blinked, but did not speak. His face was withdrawn, and all his tears had been exhausted long ago. "Put him down, Inspector, and hurry along," Superintendent Karandikar said. "Yes, sir," Ghote answered. "Where shall I put?" The superintendent looked irritatedly from side to side, as if expecting a police matron to materialize because he needed her. "Oh, find somewhere, man," he said. "Find somewhere and get to that telephone. We want immediate medical evidence if we are going to make the best case we can in court." "Yes, Superintendent." Ghote hoisted the silent Pitku onto his shoulder, as he had done before, and walked in at the back door of the pan shop. This time, however, he felt a tiny frog-paw of a hand clutching weakly at his shoulder. The faint, feeble sensation warmed him. But was it only a last flicker of a dying inner fire? Had the kidnappers after all done their worst to little maimed Pitku, frozen his heart forever? Sick with the beginnings of this new fear, he looked round for somebody with whom he could leave the little living enigma he was carrying. But there seemed to be nobody. On one side of the back room of the shop, the proprietor, his wife and grown-up daughters were standing in heavy police custody, while on the other side the three kidnappers were lined up with their faces to the wall, handcuffs linking wrist to wrist. And yes, Ghote noted one of the two he had not seen till this moment was wearing a red check shirt. He went through to the open-fronted shop itself. A pressing crowd had already collected in the lane outside, and two burly constables were keeping them back. He looked at the panorama of faces out there, hoping to find one that seemed as if it belonged to a person he could ask to come inside and nurse his terrified-to-dumbness charge. But every face showed only avid curiosity. No doubt, he thought, there are really mothers among them who would warmly enwrap little Pitku were they taken out of their surroundings now and told his story. Or there would be young girls who would be as kind. Or fathers, or indulgent uncles. but at this moment they were all submerged in that common, hating, sharp desire to know and to crow. He glanced hurriedly round the shop, spotted a dark, out-of-the-way corner behind the counter, and rested little dumb Pitku there, beside a dangling sheet of beaten silver foil hanging down to make wrappings for the occasional luxury pans a shop like this might be asked for. "Back in a minute," he said, crouching in front of the little inert body and smiling hard. Fear-frozen eyes stared back. Not a flicker of response showed in them. Would any ever show? Ghote heaved himself to his feet and made up his mind simply to be as quick in carrying out Superintendent Karandika's order as he could be. He went past the 2 guard constables and pushed his way, not without a couple of spurts of petty brutality, through the watching crowd. But then, as he turned to look up and down Bawuji Lane to see if he could spot a shop that might have a telephone, he saw, about 150 yards away at the distant road junction, a vendor with a barrow of toys from which there grew, like a bunch of bright flowers, a bundle of gas-filled balloons. He ran at full pelt up the street, and quickly as he could bought the brightest and best of the balloon bunch, a pear-shaped red one that almost said aloud, "Happiness." He ran equally fast back with it to the shop, barging his way through the crowd, holding his bright offering high above his head, and calling out sharply, "A police! Police!" In the shop he hurried over to the corner where he had left Pitku. The boy did not seem even to have moved a leg. He was sitting propped beside the sheet of silver foil where he had left him, staring straight ahead. Ghote squatted in front of him. "Look," he said, "look." He jigged the lustrous red balloon up and down on its string. Pitku's eyes, as if he were hypnotized, went to the bright globe and moved up and down as Ghote jerked on the string. "Yours," he said, "yours. Take, take." But the tiny, dirt-covered hands lay still on the boy's naked, soiled lap. "Take," Ghote said again, leaning forward and urgently crooning the word. But still 5-year-old Pitku made no move, though his eyes were fixed on the balloon where it caught the light pouring in from the sun-filled street. Carefully Ghote put the string into Pitku's uninjured left hand and closed thin, curling fingers round it. But still the boy made no move. "Now I must go for some minutes more," Ghote said. He got up reluctantly, but hurried out again, more than a little anxious in case Superintendent Karandika came out into the shop and found his orders not being instantly obeyed. Again he pushed through the avid crowd, and again looked for a shop from which to telephone. He had in the end to go along to the top of the lane and round the corner before he found anywhere. Then his call took a terribly long time to go through, and there were various difficulties to be overcome at the far end before he obtained a firm promise that an ambulance would be sent out at once. "Tell the driver to report to Superintendent Karandika in person," he concluded, recalling with a jet of bitterness the last time he had given a similar instruction, to the laboratory technicians when he had sent the kidnapper's packet for examination despite the superintendent's scorn, and had provided, looking back, one of the main clues that had broken the case. He put down the telephone receiver thoughtfully, and then, as he was about to pay, leave, and hurry back to the pan shop as ordered, another thought came to him. "No, I will make one more call," he said to the shop owner. He began dialing the number of Moneybai Desai's penthouse. It needed, he found, a little resolution to complete the dialing and listen to the ringing at the far end. The last words he had had from the proprietor of Trustex had been chill indeed, but no one else could find Pitku's father quickly, and he had decided that Taylor had to be told about Pitku and to see him with the least possible delay. But still, the idea of talking to Mr. Desai, and worse, of having to persuade him to send to the tailor, was not pleasant. Yet the tailor had to be told that Pitku had been found. No more than that yet, that Pitku had been found. The phone rang and rang. He entertained the idea of putting down the receiver and finding someone else to make the call. Would that perhaps be a more effective way even of gaining Moneybai Desai's assistance? Then, abruptly, the ringing ceased, and the far receiver was picked up. "Hello, It was the proprietor of Trustex himself, and he sounded angry. "Mr. Desai, it is Inspector Ghote, sir. I am ringing to—" "Inspector Ghote? Inspector Ghote! Thank God!" The totally unexpected urgent joy in the voice sent Ghote into a stunned silence. "Inspector, you are there?" "Yes, Sahib." "So many hours without news of that boy, Inspector, and the father is here and I have seen him. And listen, Inspector, after all I wish to pay. That boy must be got back." The words were an unstoppable gabble. "Sir, it is all right, sir, he is safe." At last Ghote's increasingly frantic interruptions got home. "You say he is safe? Little Pitku? He is found, it is true?" "Yes, Sahib. Yes, Mr. Desai. Only a few minutes ago he was found. He is alive. He is at least alive." "Then I will tell the tailor at once. Now. It is marvellous, wonderful." Evidently the note of doubt in those last words of his had not penetrated Moneybai Desai's golden glow. "Sir, Mr. Desai?" Yes, what is it?" "Can you bring Pitku's father here now? I am near the place where he was found. Superintendent Karandikar wishes Pitku to go to hospital for a thorough check-up, but if you drive down here straight away, you would most probably catch him before he goes." Yes, I will do that. Ekdam. What is the address?" Ghote told him and laid down the telephone receiver, feeling already happier than he had thought he could in all the messiness that the affair seemed to be ending in. He hurried back to the pan shop, and when he had shoved his way through the crowd, which showed no signs of lessening, he found that down in the dark, safe corner where he had put him, Pitku was actually softly and gently playing with the string of the red balloon. But hardly had he got to his knees in front of him and tried to get from him the hint of an answering smile as he himself grinned and grinned, than a sharp voice behind him caused him to scramble awkwardly to his feet. It was the Commissioner. In the street the crowd had at last dispersed, and in their place stood that magnificent polished car that had appeared equally quietly on the morning it had all begun. At the moment Ghote had slid that daily payout of his into the hand of the beggar boy with the withered, no-account stump of a leg. Then the Commissioner had proved a figure of unexpected warmth. But now things seemed to be different. "Superintendent Karandikar?" the Commissioner asked brusquely. "Where is he, man?" There, sir," Ghote stammered, pointing like a fool. Without a word, the Commissioner strode into the back of the shop. Ghote remained standing, waiting for him to come out again, not thinking there was anything he would be wanted for, but feeling somehow obliged to show himself as being on the alert. The Commissioner was in with Superintendent Karandikar for a considerable time, and Ghote had opportunities to steal quick glances at Pitku beside him on the floor, and to observe that he was at least still minutely jigging the string of the red balloon. But then, at last, the voices inside grew louder, and a moment later the Commissioner came out, closely followed by Superintendent Karandikar. In the shop, the Commissioner turned and gave the Superintendent what was evidently the last of many handshakes. "Once again, my congratulations," he said. "A magnificently planned operation from start to finish, and above all, a magnificently executed piece of pure detection." "Thank you, sir," said Superintendent Karandikar. The Commissioner turned and hurried out to his waiting, gleaming car. He brushed by Inspector Ghote, standing rigidly to attention, but appeared not to notice him. But as the car drew away, Superintendent Karandikar turned from watching it. "Ah, there you are, Inspector," he said sharply to Ghote. "I was wanting a word with you." "Yes, sir," Ghote said. "Yes. Well, I have only this to say. As soon as I get back to my desk, I am filling in the appropriate notification to you that you are to appear before a disciplinary board. Nobody, Inspector, nobody slides out of obeying orders I give him and then goes off on his own, sticking his dirty little fingers into my case. Let me tell you now, I am very much inclined to think that your final piece of insubordination in coming here ahead of the proper search party might very well have resulted in the death of that boy. So you and I will meet again shortly in different circumstances." He turned on his heel and re-entered the back of the shop. Ghote stood letting grey and sullen waves of gloom sweep over him. He hardly noticed any longer the tiny, jerky movements that were Pitku playing bit by bit more confidently with the red balloon. He hardly noticed either when the police ambulance arrived outside, to be followed almost immediately by Monibhai Desai's familiar big Buick. He watched with apathy as the ambulance driver bustled through and reported, as ordered, to Superintendent Karandika.
"Where is the child? Where the devil is the child?"
the superintendent demanded, poking his head out again. "He is here, sir," Ghote said, turning and lifting Pitku.
Right. Well, you, take him off, and make sure he gets the examination I ordered straight away."
"Yes, sir, Superintendent," the driver said, clicking his heels in a thunderous salute. He took Ghote's mute burden from him with stiff precision, turned, and walked smartly out into the street, the red balloon still clutched in Pitku's uninjured hand, bobbing and bouncing absurdly above him. Outside, the proprietor of Trust X stood with the old tailor, the richly suited, tall figure, and the lean-shanked, singlet-darned one, side by side. As the ambulance driver waited for his companion to open the back door of their vehicle, Ghote saw the tailor put out a tentative hand to his son and gently touch him. And then, at last, Pitku smiled. It was no great grin, but the small wrinkling round the eyes in that dirt-smeared face was unmistakable and unfreezing. Ghote felt his lethargic gloom sliding away like great stiff cakes of dust under the first rain of the monsoon. The disciplinary board lay ahead. It might sentence him to be dismissed the force, or to be relegated to traffic branch, or, if he put his side of the affair well, he might escape with only a reprimand. But, whatever the outcome, it did not deep down matter. What mattered was that Pitku was back where he belonged, in every way. The case had been brought to a conclusion that was satisfactory. Inspector Ghote Trusts the Heart by H.R.F. Keating was read by Sam Dastel.